Talanian, national security reporter for NBC News. Mr. Talanian, it's great to have you with us tonight.
Nice to be with you, Rachel.
I don't really know where to start. Let's start with the memo. The FBI has made what looks to a lay observer like me, has taken an extraordinary public position that this should not happen, what the White House is about to do. But it sounds like the White House is now feels they're good to go and they're going to release it tomorrow.
This whole thing is extraordinary from start to finish. Yes, that statement by the FBI was absolutely extraordinary, but it was extraordinary that members of the House got access to a classified FISA application. That does not normally happen. And it's further extraordinary that they're now making moves to make that public, even though without the normal classification review that tends to happen when we declassify things. Now, you and I are journalists. We're in favor of transparency. I want to read all this stuff, right? But the way this has happened is so disturbing to people on the Republican and Democratic side of the aisle who have worked in the intelligence community. My sources are beside themselves. This threatens, they say, to blow up 40 years of congressional oversight of intelligence.
Wow. And let's break that down a little bit. The reason they got access to this information is because even though the Justice Department and the FBI went directly to the Speaker of the House and to the White House to say, this is inappropriate, we should not be required to hand this stuff over, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan and the White House apparently pushed for it to happen anyway. And then, according to this transcript that was released today about the intelligence from the intelligence community meeting on Monday, it sounds like the Justice Department and the FBI handed over this very sensitive information with the understanding, they thought they had an agreement that it would not be disseminated. And then House Republicans turned around and spread it to the entire House and now are giving it to the public.
That's what it looks like. And this is a special case because there is a legitimate oversight function here on the Russia investigation. But normally, pending criminal investigations are not briefed to Congress. The Justice Department has a very hard line. You'll remember that James Comey refused to acknowledge before the election that the FBI was investigating Donald Trump. Even after Senator Harry Reid raised a stink and said, you have this information, he wouldn't talk about it, even privately. So that's not normal. Now we know there's an investigation, but they tend not to turn over these highly classified pieces of evidence in a pending investigation. They've done that because the Republicans are saying, look, we have a legitimate oversight function here, and that's true, but to make it public is a whole other kettle of fish.
Do you think that it is, again, just to kind of reestablish norms here, or at least remember what they were, is it actually a scandal that the Justice Department and the FBI handed over this information when it was demanded?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I think, look, the Congress has a right to.
But even in ongoing criminal investigations? Well, I mean, we all know that's a great way to say, no, you're not getting it. It's an ongoing criminal investigation.
The problem is what they're doing with it. And as you read Eric Swalwell saying, they're never going to give this stuff again. I mean, they've poisoned the well here. There's always a worry about what do we turn over to the Hill because it's going to leak, it's going to be made public. And their sort of worst nightmare for the intelligence agencies is coming true with this.
Now, the New York Times is reporting, the headline is Mueller zooms in on Trump Tower cover story. I looked at that headline and was like, yeah, we know that. Like, this is part of what they've been looking at in terms of whether or not, misleading the public about their contacts with Russians may have crossed some sort of line into obstruction of justice or some other criminal activity. What's new about this is what seems to be pretty specific allegations from somebody who used to be on Team Trump, Mark Corallo, who's a spokesman for the Trump legal team, saying that Hope Hicks, during this call, Hope Hicks said that these emails written by Donald Trump Jr. that gave lie to the statement that was being constructed on Air Force One, including partially dictated by the president himself, that those emails, quote, will never get out. That's a very serious assertion.
That seems deeply significant to me. You're right. You had to read a lot of paragraphs into that story to get to that nugget of news. But, I mean, and we'll recall that she's a 28-year-old political neophyte, but this is a serious matter. And Mark Corallo resigned in the wake of this. And in the Michael Wolff book, he alleges that Mark Corallo did it because he was concerned that this was obstruction of justice. And now we know, according to this story, the details that Hope Hicks is essentially implying that they can make these incriminating emails go away. Of course, they couldn't, and it became one of the defining stories of this whole investigation. And I think the special counsel still has questions that are not answered in this article about why Donald Trump, in particular, insisted on drafting that statement the way he did.
And this does sort of spell out a little bit what might be a problem for the president in that regard. This is describing, towards the end of the article, it's describing a call between Hope Hicks and Mark Corallo, according to 3 people who relayed his version of events to the Times. And Mr. Corallo is not disputing any of this account, which was relayed to the Times by 3 people who he supposedly told at the time. Hicks was reportedly told by Corallo that she was either being naive or she was suggesting that emails could be withheld from investigators. He described himself as concerned, alarmed, that she had said that in front of the president without a lawyer on the phone, and that conversation could not be protected by attorney-client privilege. That implies the president having legal liability over the falseness of that statement.
It absolutely does. And now it's not only known to the special counsel, but it's known to the rest of us.
The news story in the New York Times is Mueller zooms in on Trump Tower cover story. The news story reported first by Reuters and confirmed now by NBC News is that the Republican memo, based on classified information that the FBI and the Justice Department say will be dangerous to release, is nevertheless going to be released in some form tomorrow by the White House. There remain unanswered questions as to whether or not that memo was in part authored, either in conjunction with or by the White House, which sort of changes the whole cast of this. Ken Delaney, national security reporter for NBC News.
Good to be with you, Rachel.
I feel like we still just started. All right, lots more to come.